goodness. Good afternoon to everybody. Here we are at the first Monday of November of this lecture series that's part of not only talking but events and experiences that pertains to our growing our perceptions and understanding of democracy and our engagement in democracy. So for better or worse, I am the speaker for today. And from this vantage point here in the early part of November, I look back to summertime when Dean Phillips and I were planning this. I wonder why in the world I decided to insert myself in this lecture series, because I can tell you when I have been its facilitator in the past, I have not been one of the speakers. People sort of get to hear me talk on this subject more or less all the time, so I guess I'm a little bit of low-hanging fruit. Anyway, I was available, and I'm right here in the Honors Building, so I think I was an easy ask, and that's kind of how it worked out. Perhaps in retrospect, having another opinion or a different perspective would have been smarter, but I beg your indulgence, and I hope I will have a thing or two to contribute for you for today. I need you to know for sure that I am always impassioned by this topic, so much so that sometimes I rub people the wrong way in my fervor. And again, I may do the same to you. Right now, this week, this Monday, I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm a little low, and I'm a little mellow. I'm sort of decibeled down, if you will, and among other bombardments into the soul and psyche that we sort of all are carrying, last Monday's death of Serenity Birdsong has left us all hit pretty hard. I didn't know Serenity. I wish I had known her. She certainly is a dear friend and beloved by a lot of students whom I know very deeply. And it's just kind of ironic that all that was taking place exactly as we were in class last Monday. I know a lot of you had commented to me after class when we found out about it that you'd seen ambulances and ETMs and EMTs and police cars out in front of the library as you walked over, and even our speaker, Dr. Korobkov, said the same thing. He was walking all the way due east from Tech on the other side of campus, and he had just briskly walked by the quad and had noticed all the police cars there and wondered what went down. We didn't find out until after class. And then we've all had to process it since then. Some of you were actually in the building. I know this because you emailed me. You didn't make it to class. You were hit so hard by having seen and experienced what you had to experience last week, and I'm so sorry for that. That was really tough. And then, of course, school closed on Tuesday, and then we had that really powerful vigil on Wednesday night of last week. And I hope you were there. It was really sweet, and I thought it was emotionally healthy and touching, and I thought it was one of MTSU's actually really finest hours. I thought our SGA President Mackay did a really good job. I thought he really felt the pulse of the campus and sort of showed up and helped us show up to be there together. And I really felt that that was sort of some of the best that MTSU does. I hope you were there. I hope you were a part of it. It was pretty special. I didn't email you this in advance of last Wednesday, and my apologies, because a lot of faculty were emailing their classes, sending out words of encouragement. Maybe I was just sort of self-indulging in my own emotions at the time. Maybe I was in my own head, and I apologize for not having been as outreaching to each of you as perhaps I should have been. Let me just say now that for last week, this week, anytime in the future, my door is always open to you. I consider myself an empathetic person and with a big heart and a good listener, and that's what's so great about this Honors College, is that the doors are open in this university and in this building and in this space. And when MTSU says that we are student-centered, that's no joke. It's really about wanting to know that we care about you all and what you are experiencing and feeling. I have a cousin, good old Tennessee boy, who used to say, well, if you're going to love on somebody, they first got to be willing to crawl up in your lap. I don't know exactly where that aphorism comes from, but I like the idea. And the crawling up in the lap piece is, you do have to kind of knock on our doors. Dean Bowles' door is always open, mine is too. Just come in any time. When you don't take advantage of these open doors, you're not crawling up in the lap so somebody can love on you just properly. Anyway, about last week and Wednesday night specifically, I didn't say this again in an email prior to the vigil because I thought it would have been an extremely poor taste, but I'm going to say it now. That was an absolute civic engagement, community engagement beyond the classroom experience. And if you were there, please feel free to count it for your semester and write about it in your final reflection. Our caring about each other, our caring about our community, our caring about those beyond ourselves, our caring about the other, our believing that those people who are not exactly like me and not one of my kind are in fact equally worthy of respect and my respect, and of equity in this world. That's really what I believe democracy is all about. And I think that's certainly a big lesson and a good that we can take from our loss of serenity in our community. So that circles back here indeed to my topic today, and this may or may not work. Do I click it again, Nancy?
For it won't be long, so I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. You just call on your brother when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. You just might have a problem that you understand. We all.
If you weren't there, I'm sure you've seen that online, but it was pretty special. And it was a nice time to feel communion with each other on this campus. Tomorrow is Tuesday, November 5th, and it's the National United States of America Election Day. Hopefully most of you have already voted. Knock wood. I certainly was advocating for it and trying to get everybody to the polls during early voting. I went myself that first Saturday of early voting on the 19th of October to my hometown before our class went. Here's a picture of me on voting day with my oldest granddaughter, who's 5. I took her into the voting booth with me. I actually carried a step stool with me as well, which the nice people at my polling place were gracious to allow me to take into my little booth so that my granddaughter could stand up fully tall and be able to sort of try to read the names. And she did all the button pushing. Obviously 4 years ago she was just a baby. I will continue to do that with my grandchildren as I did with my children. I will take them to the polls with me every time. Because in the faith in which I was reared, the Bible version from Proverbs says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old they will not depart from it. And I believe that's why I am also a teacher, because I believe that principle to my core, and this is my personal professional pathway I've chosen to live that value. And here are you guys at the polls. This is one of the pictures that Miss Robin took that day when we went down to the square. It was only 2 weeks ago, seems like a lifetime. How many of you voted that day? Oh, a good number of you. How many of you this election season are actually first-time voters? Wow. I love that. I want to thank you for letting me be part of that important first-time memory with you. And I hope it was a gateway drug into I want you to start at 18 and go until you pass away. I know that our Rutherford County Election Commission goes into, as soon as voter registration ended, in fact, they told me the very next day, they start going into the nursing homes around Rutherford County to let the elder folk vote. And even if you get a driver's license at 16 and you go on to, maybe when you get in your senior years, your children and grandchildren take your driver's license away from you, they won't take your voting right away from you. And I love that President Jimmy Carter turned 100 this fall, and he made a point to get to the polls. So this is me being a fangirl. I was one of those people who took the trek down to Plains, Georgia a few years ago to hear former President Carter teach Sunday school class at the Plains, Georgia Baptist Church. I'd always heard that that was a peak experience, and I was on my bucket list, and I made a point of making that happen, and he was a mere 95 at the time, so I will always hold on to that memory. But this is why we're here to talk about today, because this is what I believe. I believe that voting is precious, and it's a cherished American privilege, and it's a hard-fought for right, for which blood and lives and tears were shed to open voting systematically more and more to more and more people. That's all true, but it is also a civic duty. With citizenship come responsibilities, and when you come of legal age, you are a U.S. citizen. You must step into your role. You must put on the mantle of citizenship. It's not something you can sidestep or should step away from. Although you, of course, need to make informed choices, but you don't want to make a decision to throw away your birthright. You need to understand the privilege into which you were born, and with that privilege comes enormous responsibilities. If you think voting's not for you, and it's just something you can't be bothered with, or it's really not your responsibility, here's another way in which I tick people off. Here's what I want to tell you. If that's how you feel, you need to move someplace where you don't have to be anything but an amoeba or some moss on a log. Russia might love to have you. Vladimir Putin probably would. He prefers people who do not get engaged in thought or any sort of idea that's intellectually forward-thinking. He wants to be in complete control, and you have to just do nothing but be an amoeba without any ideas, and perhaps that would be a wonderful way to continue. This is true for natural-born citizens, who especially have the privilege. You were born here, you take being an American for granted, you blow it off. Oh, and you say, because I'm a history professor, oh, I don't like history. Oh, bless your little heart. Be keenly aware that that's the story of how we got here and what we're all about. You're choosing not to know that and understand that fully in your fiber and your being. You're choosing not to be a part of civil society. It's imperative on you to know what our American history is. Anyone who is a legal American citizen, 18 years of age, who live here, work here, raise your families here, you benefit from all the economic security, the legal security, the social and cultural and global benefits that being an American is all about. If you don't care about taking on the responsibilities of citizenship, I honestly cannot contain my wrath. I have no time for you. You need to go. This is not a country for slothful, uncaring, uncommitted people. And this is true for naturalized citizens as well. If you've immigrated here for economic benefit, and you are given the privilege of American citizenship, you swear an oath to this country, don't do it unless you actually mean it. You have civic obligations from here on out. And being an American is not a coasting job. It requires heart and purpose, civic vigor and caring. And yes, you have to be educated adequately for these civic responsibilities in order to be able to engage in being an American. You have to learn why it matters. And of course, that's what college is all about. I've already mentioned the 3 C's. You don't come here for a degree. Let's be clear about that. You come here for an education. And part of that is the responsibilities of citizenship, which is fundamental to your fuller understanding of what the life is around you. And that's true, honestly, in American education from earliest childhood, such as my grandchild, to pre-K, on throughout life. These are important. Richard Haas, who is the president of formerly was the president up until 2023, so through last year, he'd been doing it for 10 years, of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's a former member of the U.S. State Department. He's traveled the world his entire adult life. He's written many books, but the Bill of Obligations is one of his fairly recent ones in which he discusses the meaning of citizenship. And he says that for democracy to continue and thrive, it requires that all of us as citizens fully take on the obligations as beneficiaries of the American system. And democracy requires that all of us act for democracy to succeed. We have obligations to one another and to the country. And if this grand experiment of American democracy is to survive, we can't just continually be talking about our rights, which is a very two-year-old thing. You know, what about my needs? I have the right to free speech. I have the right to do anything I want to. Well, with those rights comes your incredible responsibility. And we must commit again anew, constantly as American citizens, about why we are citizens and what our responsibility is and how we go about doing it. That's part of why every university, including MTSU, celebrates Constitution Day every year. It's just sort of a nucleus point to be able to bring us together to keep these principles fresh in our minds and the forefront of our purpose, especially as we start the beginning of the academic year. As for Mr. Haas, the civic obligations that he discusses in his book includes promoting the common good, putting country above party, staying open to compromise, even if that doesn't advance our ideas fully, if it's imperfect, to accept that imperfection, valuing our national norms, respecting people in government service, and remaining civil and rejecting violence always, and of course being informed and then getting involved. And getting involved means voting. Another book I have in front of you is Julia Maskivker, who's a political scientist at Rollins College, which is in Florida. Rollins is in sort of the Orlando area. She's the author of The Duty to Vote, which is written on the values of participating in society for the benefit of others. That good citizenship is a value of democracy, and it is critical to democracy. And she says that not voting is morally wrong. It means you don't care. Oh, you couldn't care less. You're a person without any moral framework. What is morally right is voting responsibly, caring enough to take the time to be educated, to study, to investigate, to be responsible about the issues that are happening in our society, to know what's at stake, not only for yourself, but for your family and your fellow citizens and your neighbors. Voting is an instrumental activity. It is most important because it's collective. It affects the quality of institutions and policies, it puts governments in power, and then removes poor government from power. Its purpose is to create and build and improve justice. Voting is this shared activity that can change things and can impact society and government, and its purpose is to help. It's a common purpose for a common good, and again, Maskivker says it's a moral and civic duty. And both of these writers root their argument in U.S. history and in our founding documents. What's in front of you is the preamble of the National Constitution, which opens with the need to form a more perfect union, which is absolutely, unquestionably, critically, the civic responsibility that's in front of each one of us. And all the more so, I should say, you, because you're the future of this nation. You're the next generation. You're the ones responsible for building and creating and actualizing and forming the nation that we are growing into. And it's incumbent on you to correct the mistakes that you see my generation has made. Dean Weil and I were commenting that we had thought being a boomer was cool, but we understand it's no longer cool. I'm so sorry about that. We thought we were the cutting edge of incredibly cool, but we understand that you think we have failed. I'll take that. But note that the onus then is on you to show me your goods and make it work. Because it is powerful work. It's proactive and actionable work. It requires your time and effort and focus and intellect and your deep knowledge and your moral rectitude and your loving heart. And because citizenship is one of the fundamental reasons you are here at university, those three fundamental reasons, you are here to learn what you need to learn so that you personally yourself can take on this responsibility of helping form this more perfect union and improving our nation. So this is the civic responsibility ahead of you. It's your responsibility as a citizen, and it's your time. And as we strive to form a more perfect union, there are important principles to consider. What is the direction that this greater perfection should have us moving toward? And what is the activism and agency of the people who take on this role, who then become public people. Alexander Hamilton referred to them as public men, but I won't take that gender bias. I'll say public people, public humans. These are our calls to action, because citizenship is proactive. Voting is direct action. It's minimal, very basic. It's not going over and above. We can all do much more, but I would say that voting is a baseline requirement. Election season is time to think and reflect and remember what our American values and virtues are that characterize us. We often think of ourselves as through eyes of American exceptionalism. That's a pretty jingoistic idea, but we also love to pat ourselves on the back with a lot of self-pride, and every little child is sort of reared with this smug American understanding and uncritical faith in who we are. But why do we think that? And this is the subject, of course, of many high school essay contests to write on for yourself. But I posit that the national governmental core of who we are and the idea of continuing on to form a more perfect union is really at the heart of what really constitutes the greatness of this country. It's we the people is that core, we the people. From the founding of this nation, the people have been a polyglot of languages and ethnicities and divergent histories and religions and skin colors and genders and eccentricities and multiple personalities and skills and abilities. So much diversity. It's part of our national definition. And anyone who wants to imagine that is simply closing his or her eyes. We're a pluralistic people who built our country after the arrival on these shores, coming by whatever means to seek financial betterment or opportunities, or we come from so many different national origins. We got here by hook or by crook, stolen or enslaved, walking across, being sent to prisons or indenture. Legally and illegally we arrived, smuggled in on top deck or below, and we arrived in poverty, and some with distinction. Many arrived broken and ignoble. And yet our common great American value is that we're being able to take advantage of this nation and create what in 1916 the American intellectual and writer Randolph Bourne referred to as the beloved community. That concept went on to really be the basis of the idea behind the civil rights movement of uniting those of us in diversity and difference into a beloved community in our nation to create good and form this more perfect union. So back to the preamble, forming a more perfect union. A lot of things are built into that. Note that in this early Jeffersonian wording, the pursuit of happiness, secure the ends of government are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. There's the hooker. We succeed in being better Americans when the consent of the governed provides the impetus for that. We are the governed, and we're the ones who provide the consent. And when we provide that consent, we're engaging in actual democracy, because that's what it's technically all about. We have to participate in choosing what we choose. This alternate Declaration of Independence wording talks about this very idea, and again, it requires active engagement. So as we talk about the direction of creating a more perfect union and the activism and agency required to do that, what's the measure? Alexander Hamilton, again, in the first Federalist paper, written back in 1787, writes, "It remains to be seen whether societies of men or women or people are capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they're going to be forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident or force." It's the big question. Do we have the capacity to govern ourselves, the consent of the governed? How do we do it? And you know, the jury's honestly still out on that. If you don't participate in being a part of the solution to the process, if you say it's not my job, I could care less, strikes me as though this great American experiment in democracy could be classified as a failure. I don't know. I think, in all truth, it rides on you. And I really genuinely believe that. So if you're feeling the weight of Dr. Evins on your shoulder, go ahead and feel that. I'm putting it there on you. We were the first constitution not to be built around a monarchy or a chief central power, and so far we are the longest lived constitutional democratic republic at this point, 237 years, the longest lived, the longest one. But will it continue? And, you know, that's back to another founding father question, although this is probably apocryphal. Dean Bob will tell us whether or not for sure. But the old statement supposedly made by Benjamin Franklin, what kind of government do we have? It's a republic if you can keep it. And that's really the question. Will your actions allow you to keep it? You have to be working, though, on building this nation and imagining what the future is using your own vision. I often say that your vote is not a Valentine, a love poem. It's a chess move. It's a strategy to be moving on toward this trajectory that you imagine for the future. Here's my list. You could start writing down what do you think this more perfect union ought to look like. I'm not going to dwell on mine. You each have your own. But I do have my own vision of what I think it should be. My little list could be a starting point. We know that our system of government was built on this sort of logical, rational, Enlightenment thinking. David Brooks wrote about it. He discusses the sort of Enlightenment project that he says this nation was. And we had a rocky beginning, but we're basing it on quintessential Enlightenment values, and that's what our Constitution absolutely is. American Bar Association talks about the kinds of principles that are necessary in order to create a good government. And he said, and American Bar Association says that being a citizen requires that we owe something to the government, and that's part of our national responsibility, that governance necessitates our inclusion. So the American Bar Association essentially asks virtually the same question in the present day that Alexander Hamilton did 237 years ago. If our nations and our institution are ones that we love deeply and we benefit from, does not that impose obligations on us to continue? And because we enjoy these privileges of citizenship, we absolutely have to give back. So we ask ourselves, what do we owe to our democracy? There's always a long list of these key ideas. Is voting relevant? Yes, every single vote matters, every election matters. You might say to yourself, oh, I'm just not political. This doesn't pertain to me. And everything pertains to you. Every policy decision that's made by both local government, state government, and the federal government pertains to you. How much internet access you get, the electricity that's going to charge up your phones, when you go swimming in the lake, when you blithely or ungratefully use any or all public institutions. These are all provided to you through our system of government. And it's something that we all have to work on together. Yuval Levine, who's a conservative journalist, wrote a book called A Time to Build. Talk about we have to recommit to these institutions that are providing us the infrastructure that we need for our families and our communities. We have to recommit and respect them, and this respecting our national norms and institutions is part of that task. We don't drive down the wrong side of the street. We do stop at stoplights. All of these are for the common good. These are part of our civic virtue actions. We do what's beneficial to the largest number of people. But there are other things that we do, and voting is a part of that. Voting was always a privilege. I mean, obviously when it started off, you had to be wealthy and male and white. People demanded that right be expanded to them. Initially it was poor people, unlanded people, people who did not own anything. The era of the common man, the early part of the 1800s. It moved on after the Civil War to African American men. That got immediately taken away from them. Women, by the early part of the 20th century, struggled to get their right to vote. And then, in the early part of the 1970s, 18-year-olds. Everybody was saying, we want to be part of the solution. We must be able to be respected citizens and be a part of this work, of this collective shared work. So I'm a historian, And I happened to study when and how women claimed their citizenship. And one of the things I really, really love is the phrase that was written by head of NASA, the National American Woman Suffrage Association, right after the completion of the 19th Amendment, which happened in August of 1920, but Carrie Chapman Catt wrote this in the early part of a book that she was beginning soon thereafter, that the vote is a power, it's a weapon of offense and defense, it's a prayer. And progress is calling on you to make no pause. You must act. When the suffragists asked and asked and asked and asked politely and then began picketing the White House for the right for women to vote, they were acting righteously for the benefit of others, for other women. So I personally take this very personally, because anytime someone sort of rubs that right to vote in anyone's face or my face, I am concerned that you do not understand the national story that brought us to where we are. It's about valuing every single person's role in this work. George Lakoff is a psychology professor, was a psychology professor at Cal Berkeley, and he says that 98% of our thought and action is unconscious. So if we're going to be true citizens, we have to consciously, proactively work at it. We have to choose citizenship. We have to choose to act, as Carrie Chapman Catt said. We have to educate ourselves to be enlightened, and thus education is crucial ultimately to democracy, which then is about why we are advancing our civic purpose. Many writers from the dawn of time have created lists of what these civic virtues are that we should be working on. Benjamin Franklin had a list. Many others have contributed lists of what these civic values are that we need to be evolving toward, maturing toward. One on my list is optimism, or you can also say that as hope. There's been a lot of research on this idea of being able to imagine a future beyond the present, sort of long-range planning, deferred gratification, if you will, carrying a vision of hope in our heart that we can see it down the pike, but we have to do things now on faith to get us to what that vision is in the future. And for me, that ongoing work of More Perfect Union is sort of foundational to the hope and optimism that we do know there can be a strong end result down the pike, one that we're continuing to work on. So I'm back to Carrie Chapman Catt's the vote is a prayer principle. It's optimism of what we can build together, hope in the future, hope for our collective futures. Our political leaders use optimism and hope to build future because they know that we all need it and we need to be replenished with it. We can't just milk it, we have to sort of give it out to others, and we know that it's something we want. And how do we create it? To be good citizens and have hope, we have to have certain values. And even the American Medical Association, I know you can't read that because it's bacteria letters, but it talks about acting, engaging, accomplishing, taking on something. When you vote and you are a contributing member of this society, you're not only bettering society and working toward this future that you have as your vision, but you are also personally bettering yourself. Voting is a social determinant of health and a key metric of the human mind, says the American Medical Association. Our AMA supports measures to facilitate safe and equitable access to voting. So much so does the American Medical Association believe that voting is beneficial to a person, that they have come out with a voting policy that the AMA recommends to the federal government, that voting is a harm reduction strategy to safeguard public health and mitigate unnecessary risk of infectious disease, Lord have mercy, by extending polling hours, increasing the number of polling locations, extending early voting periods, increasing mail-in ballot. Oh, saying that mail-in ballot postage should be free. There's a great idea. I support that one. Adequate resourcing of the U.S. Postal Service, improved access to drop-off locations, use of a P.O. box for voter registration. The AMA, American Medical Association, is promoting these policies as being a possible mitigator of infectious disease. The AMA opposes requirements for voters to stipend a reason in order to receive a ballot. Our AMA acknowledges that voting is a social determinant of health and significantly contributes to the analyses of other social determinants of health as a key metric. The AMA recognizes that gerrymandering, it's interesting, I hope Dr. Franklin knows this, which disenfranchises individuals and communities and limits access to health care, including but not limiting the expansion of comprehensive medical insurance coverage, negatively impacts. So gerrymandering negatively impacts health outcomes. And the AMA will collaborate with appropriate stakeholders and provide resources to establish strong relationships between voter participation and health outcomes. This has so much to do with physical health and mental health, but that voting, I want you to have an idea and notion that you're creating a pathway to the future, that you are contributing to your community, but its byproduct is health and also bringing joy. So in the Sparking Joy framework, voting has the capacity to do that because it is an action, just as Carrie Chapman Catt said, for forward-thinking, forward-acting, future-building human behavior. When you vote, you relieve stress because you are actually doing something physical, as part of the green bean theory, for your health. So vote to bring yourself joy into your own life. Which circles me back to this. Democracy is community caring. Democracy is being part of a shared enterprise in which everyone has a voice, and everyone has an equal voice, and everyone's voice is valued and respected, a sense that we indeed are all in this together. And together we constitute the beloved community. Together we engender and make happen collective action, that everyone's voice matters, and that everyone's voices represent the diversity of who we are, that we should be equitably represented and included, that we should establish justice, just as the preamble of our Constitution says. And when I think about those principles for democracy, it makes me think of DEIJ, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, which apparently our current legislature says we're not allowed to discuss at universities, so I may not be here tomorrow. If it's in the United States Constitution, I'm not entirely sure how the state can say we can't do it. I argue that these are fundamental to the American system and to democracy, and without them, we're not a democracy. So please go vote. Please act. Please let your voice be a prayer toward a more perfect union, however you personally define it. And I like the picture that someone snapped of just the lights that happen on Wednesday night, because together, when we act together and we make the country better, we bring the light. So prepare. There are sample ballots around. If you haven't voted, be sure to pull together all the paperwork and the identification that you need to know who you're voting for. Be ready when you get there. Go. Take the green bus tomorrow, or your friends. Take them. If you've already voted, take friends that you go and go with them. Our green bus line goes all around campus all day tomorrow, starting at 9 o'clock until the polls close tomorrow evening. And we'll take our students from campus over to Central Magnet School and back. Vote, participate in the franchise. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. all across the state of Tennessee, no matter what county. Note that if you are in line by 7 o'clock, you will be permitted to vote, even if the line extends on down the block. Vote together. Gather. MTSU and Murfreesboro voters are invited to attend a party at the polls that this university is hosting at Central Magnet School, next to that pole where our buses go. We're going to be setting up there about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Come, be a part of that. Even if you've already voted, come hang with us. Help. And the way you can help tomorrow is come back to this room and sign up with the folks who are here with Civic Tennessee, who are going to be running an election hub where people will be calling in. You're going to be urging others to go vote. Claim their mental health, claim their joy. And then watch. Come back either here tomorrow night after 7 or go to the student union, where all across campus people are going to be watching the results parties, to watch the results come in, and then reflect. You're going to reflect on this in your final reflection at the end of the semester. But all tomorrow night at the watch parties, both here and over at Student Union, there are going to be faculty members there. Just talk about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're feeling. This I can tell you, and I know for sure, that when this election comes down, and I don't expect this to be over anytime soon, but I think we will sort of know the gist of it, probably by tomorrow night. And what I do know, that it will be emotionally draining, and then I also know, because this happens every election cycle, about 50% of you will be elated and thrilled, and about 50% of you will be heartbroken and dismayed and wonder, why did I even bother? That's why we want to reflect together, that's why we want to share, we want to stay connected. Because if you happen to be part of the, yay, my team is going forward, and you're in that feeling of jubilance, that's fair, you should be, you should revel in it, you should enjoy it. And if you're part of the 50% that is going to be sad and forlorn and think, I'm going to have to move to Canada, let's talk that through. Let's stay and be connected. And a week from today, in fact, democracy at the intersection is going to be the topic of Dr. Jennifer Pettit, and we're going to reflect together even more and try to debrief about it. The conversation's not over, but we know this is part of the common good that we're all about. So these are some folks from Civic Tennessee. Y'all stay and talk to them about the hub tomorrow if you'd like to.